What's up guys, Veteran Gamer here, and today's video is about Hades and how it's my new game of the year for 2020. So, way back I made a video talking about how Ghost of Tsushima was robbed of Game of the Year for 2020, and that The Last of Us Part 2 had stolen the award from Ghost of Tsushima. Now, at the making of that video, I had never played Hades at the time. I stated it in that video, and it was a game that it was on my list of I gotta get done eventually, and I eventually had the time to get it done after I fixed my PC with some of the issues I had. And this game blew me away. It blew me away more than I expected. Let's start off with the presentation. The art style and the graphics are fantastic. Even though it's like a top-down Diablo-esque view, the graphics are fantastic. The animation's fantastic. The music is fantastic. Everything from a presentation standpoint, this game stands out. And the developers did a fantastic job with that. On top of that, being a roguelite kind of game, you obviously progress through the game as well as the story by dying. While it is possible to complete the game without dying once, especially on your first playthrough, it is highly unlikely for the average player, and that you will probably die numerous times before completing the game. But that's what makes the game great, because as you start off through the game, there's a lot of systems in the game, and the way the game works is that it'll give you a couple to start with, and then after X number of runs or attempts to escape your imprisonment, it'll introduce a new system to you. And then for that run, you'll have that system, and then progressively going forward, that system could be available to you in subsequent runs to make your character stronger. On top of that, the way roguelikes works, if you're not familiar with it, is in Hades particularly, there's a few in-game currencies that you earn throughout a run that will go with you after you die, and you can then use it to upgrade your character permanently. Whereas a lot of other upgrades, whether it be weapons or little abilities, they're only for that run, and once you die, you lose it. The story itself actually progresses through as you go along, whether it's beating a boss or dying numerous times. The story progresses as you complete runs or die. On top of this, the environments themselves. So the way Hades works is that there's basically 4 main environments that you have to go through, but the layout of these environments are completely random. And on top of that, even the enemies as well as the boss fights themselves. The boss fights can actually change based on how you do, how many times you've died, whether or not you've beaten the boss. And when the boss changes, so does the story too, and the story progresses. And not only are the layouts random, so some of the areas that you enter will actually become like mini challenges, where it's just like, hey, you gotta survive 45 seconds, otherwise it's game over. Things like that. There's a whole bunch of challenges throughout the world, and what makes it fresh is the fact that every single run you do, even though the order of the environments are the same, it keeps it fresh, because you'll either have new story elements that are implemented, or you'll have new tools at your repertoire to proceed and get further along in the game. And it keeps it fresh. It keeps it excited, because you're always getting something new, even though you could have completed or attempted 15 runs, and you start to say, well, that would get repetitive. Well, on paper it would get repetitive until you see how it's implemented, how the new systems are introduced to you, but how the story's actually progressing, even though you haven't actually beat the game. So the developers did a fantastic job. This game completely blew me away. And the one thing I want to emphasize, especially for Hades, even though it's a smaller developer, is the fact that this game feels complete. I mean, I have nothing bad to say. I can't remember the last time I played a game where I played it, I was addicted, I loved it, and there was not at least one complaint. There's always at least one complaint about the game, about any game I've played. And yet, when it comes to Hades, I literally have none. I draw a blank. Right? The only thing that should be considered an issue, and this is totally subjective, is whether or not the game itself is for you. Some people might find that repeating over and over just to progress the story, seeing the similar environments but different layouts. It can be discouraging for some. It may not be for some. They may just completely be like, it's just repetitive to me, and that's fine. That's a taste standpoint. Not everybody plays first-person shooters. Not everybody plays fighting games. So not everybody plays a roguelike. But for those that do, I mean, it's hard. It's hard to sit there and say that there's a better roguelike than Hades that was released in 2020. I mean, Hades, I've heard from a lot of people how good it was. I've heard from a lot of people how fantastic it was. I heard the rumblings about it. But I myself was just like, we'll see. You always know how critics blow things up. But on this game, they were 100% authentic. And to me, Hades is fantastic. Whether it's the art, whether it's the music, the boss fights. Boss fights are fantastic. How you have to constantly change the way you do things. How there's builds, and yet the builds themselves, you can make a ridiculously OP build, go through the game, finish it, restart another run, and do a completely different build. It's the amount of depth for a game that on paper is so simple is mind-boggling. And this game is as close to perfect as you can get, especially for a game released in 2020. It's my new game of the year for 2020. I have nothing but high praises. Personally speaking, I'm giving Hades a perfect 10 out of 10. This is Veteran Gamer, and I hope to see you guys next time.